So I came back. Well, I came back with one question. It turned into two questions. The first question was, why is my people doing this? And as you can see, I'm working hard to work this out. The second question was, why are you helping us, when I got back home? And you, meaning the American people, and in particular, the Christians. Because there are two basic components that go into a perfect storm that keep us stuck and have brought us to this day when, in fact, the peace process, and there never really was one, people are seeing that it really is failing and that there is no hope for a diplomatic solution at this point. And here's what happened to me. Predictably, although I didn't know it at the time, it's starting to change now to some extent. But the institutional Jewish community, and certainly the synagogues were close to me. They were not interested in my message. I came home. I wanted to tell my community, whoa, we've got a problem. Listen to me. This is serious. And I was called various names. And those doors were closed. But the doors of the churches really flung open. This was an amazing discovery for me. Now, don't forget that I didn't go into churches. I was brought up to fear churches. I would no sooner walk into a church than I would walk in front of a bus. You know, it's a dangerous place. Christians are going to convert you or kill you. It's not clear what's worse. But I started to go to churches because a lot of the people who I visited Palestine with that summer were Christian, and those were the networks that I was connecting with. And I had a pastor who had invited me to speak, a man who was very devoted to human rights, and who knew what I was going to say, come up to me afterwards, and he said, I agree with what you've said. I think it's a really serious problem, and I think that the issue of justice, human rights in Palestine is key to the resolution of the problem, but we have to be very careful and sensitive to Jewish feelings when we talk about this. And I naively said to him, what do you mean? And he said, look, as a pastor, a man who studied Christian history, I feel personally responsible for the Holocaust. This is our history. This is 2,000 years of Christian anti-Semitism, institutionalized in the theology. That's what the Holocaust was a result of, and he's right. And he said, I've worked for human rights on a global basis for my entire career. It's the basis of my ministry. I work with imams and rabbis in an interfaith context, and we deal with human rights issues across the globe, but we don't touch this one out of respect for the rabbis. And I had a moment of truth at that point. So it was like a bolt of lightning. I turned to him and I said, Pastor, you have to do something else with your Christian guild. This is not helpful to us Jews. We're in big trouble. The rabbis who won't talk about Israel are not friends of Israel and are not friends of the Jewish people. And the Christians who enable that and collude with that are not friends of the Jewish people. And this is not what Jesus Christ would want you to do. Which shocked me a little bit that here I am lecturing this pastor about what Jesus wants him to do. But that's another story. We'll get to that. And what I realized was, we'll get to American politics in a minute. I mean, look, 65 years ago, the Christian world stood before the ovens and said, what have we done? And in a very appropriate, very faithful, very deliberate project, undertook to fix Christian theology. To say, we have to purify ourselves. We have to get rid of the anti-Jewishness in our theology, and it's deeply embedded. But it's not what our faith is about, and we can fix this. By God, they did. And pastors, clergy for the last 3 generations have been educated in a revised theology, a radically revised Christian theology. This may not be across the board, but it's certainly very, very endemic. Certainly in this country, I think it began with the confessing church in Germany. And then you have people like Paul Van Buren early on, and other theologians, who basically said, the Jews are not the darkness. In fact, the Jews are the light. The Jews are God's chosen people. We are the new Israel, but we come in under that covenant. And then all kinds of systematic theological problems happen. Do we have one covenant? Do we have two parallel covenants? Systematic theology, it is what it is. But the point was that Christianity officially rehabilitated Judaism, and not only that, took Judaism and elevated it to the prime position. Now, just very briefly, to take a shortcut to it, the problem is that that's a slippery slope to a theological justification for political Zionism, for the idea that the Jews have a primary right to the land, divine, God-given. And if that's not good enough, history, which Christians used to use to prove that the Jews, in fact, were the damned of God, now that the Jewish people have been restored to their homeland, well, this is proof that God loves them and that we were wrong. I think that it was a wrong turn for Christianity at that point. It was a moment of truth for Christianity. You did need to take a look at what was wrong that caused this horror, but you had to look at yourselves and your own triumphalism. In fact, what you did was you took Judaism, you offered a guilt offering, you elevated Judaism to the triumphalist position, you went back to a literal understanding of the covenant, which was tribal, where the land is a real place, and God is worshipped on a real mountain, and there's one people who's in charge of that process, chosen special. And then you tuck in under it and say, well, and we're part of that. So it's Judeo-Christian triumphalism. I think it's, with apologies to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, it's cheap penitence. And it doesn't work.